scheduler lines. I will say, I'm recording this the same day most people will probably see it, which is Friday, right? So technically, yesterday, it was actually at midnight my time, was when the Cloud9 EG game was played out in the lower bracket. Tonight, so hopefully you'll be able to see it, this video just before, and it'll help hype you up for it. We've got the Immortals versus TSM game, which, listen, on paper, yes, of course TSM's supposed to win that, but we'll get into that. Maybe there'll be some, and listen, we'll definitely do our best to at least theorycraft a world in which Immortals wins that. And then after that, because of the way the format is, we're in the lower bracket, remember now, we've got this scenario where then you've got the upper bracket final for the two teams that are already at Worlds, which is 100 Thieves and Team Liquid. Interestingly enough, they're already teams that, like, you know, maybe one of these would have been there, maybe one wouldn't. We never know, depending on what part of the split. And we'll go into that game. So let's start right at the top, because I will say, Crumbz, it's been a few weeks since we did one of these, and we haven't basically covered the rest of the playoffs. Like, going into the playoffs, if people remember, it was a really different world. So I thought it would actually be useful, even though it's not a chronological show, this isn't really the next episode people are watching, they've watched all the rest of the games. Let's use that as a way to actually contrast how wild the playoffs have been doing. Because if you remember, coming into the playoffs, the number one team in LCS, spoiler, they just got eliminated last night. It was Evil Geniuses. Like, Evil Geniuses were looking fucking amazing at the end of the split. The style worked. Obviously, Jizuke was even getting, like, MVP nods from people. Like, everyone thought, like, this team's cracked the meta. Like, everyone's praising Peter Dawn and Empire and bringing in Danny, etc. Like, there were so many positives for this team, Crumbz. Give us some thoughts. Why do you think it's fallen apart in the playoffs?
So I think when it came to the match against 100 Thieves, it was really clear that EG had a wrong meta read and a wrong read on their own strengths. I think they prioritized such weird champions, and I think the most outrageous one that everyone's going to remember, and I still think it's outrageous because I'm trying to figure out why it even happened, is how you let your AD carry, who mains Tristana, who is undefeated on Tristana, had just won you a game before, hard carried with probably the greatest play that LCS has had this year, if not period. Sure. And you put him on Ziggs when Ziggs has had no priority. And if that hasn't been enough all year long, when you put him on Mages have been your worst games. So that made no sense whatsoever. I think that was an outrageous moment for EG, and then they failed to value their own Rise, their own Renekton, these picks that won so many games for them in the regular season. They just dropped them completely. 100 Thieves prepped against it, had strategies to take them away, and it felt like EG just like, oh yeah, no, these champions, we don't want them anymore. So I think they had a really wrong read on that, and then inside the game itself, they played really poorly when they didn't have that. Another matchup, I don't know why they picked this, Jason to Gangplank twice. That is not an easy matchup at all. I don't care if you're Impact. Playing Jason to GP, you need a lot of experience and a lot of help, because GP out sustains you. Right? You're not just trading autos for nothing against a tank. You are actually getting hit back, and you're going to be very low. I didn't like this matchup either. It's something that they didn't play all split long. So they looked really strong in summer because they had a specific style that revolved around champions that they were good at. In playoffs, they try to be cute. They try to outplay the opponent with new champions, thinking, oh, they're going to prepare against this. We're going to try something new. And they were trash at it. And they didn't recognize quickly enough that they needed to improve at it, or that they needed to go back to those old picks. And then they got dismantled. And the way they lost, though, I thought that there was no chance that EG would actually beat Cloud9. I didn't even care how bad Cloud9 was looking. The fact that they lost in such a way that was uninspiring. It was just, there wasn't that much to look forward to in EG. It felt like they just spent the time during end of summer season to playoffs just practicing the wrong things. Makes me think that, there's no chance. Because I remember as a player, when you go into a playoff series, you've just been a week off practicing. You haven't really played any stage games. You're wondering if what you've done is really good or if it's really bad. You don't really know if what the read you have on the game is right. But then you find out on your first game, holy shit, we have been practicing the wrong thing. We're absolutely screwed. I think that must have been the feeling for EG, because they did not come back from the matchup against 100 Thieves stronger. They got worse.
Like, what's crazy to me is, look, I get that it's not as simple as just because you win on something in a regular split doesn't mean it's equally as strong or has the same priority in the meta when you come to the playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs, especially when it's a big double elim bracket, it's going to have its own meta, just like Worlds does, you know. Week 1 of Worlds is never the same meta as, like, the semi-finals of Worlds, obviously. But even so, I definitely agree with you. What's bizarre about this to me is, this is like, if you think about it, right, EG obviously earlier in the regular split wasn't actually that good a team. They were in a team that was in a bit of trouble, right? Then the team hit that streak where they were winning most games they were playing against every level of opponent. And as you say, dude, they did it by, if anything, at times like going against the meta. They just played their style. They played to Jizuke's strengths. They even did all these interesting moves. Like what I found very bizarre to me was like they actually seemed like the team who was comfortable with the idea of like, we'll figure out the meta for us. And then in the playoffs, as you're saying, it's almost like they were like, oh, is this thing supposed to be strong? Like, oh, everyone's saying Ziggs is OP bot lane. So like, even though to me, the way the Danny guys played all split long, you're not going to throw him in the fucking deep end on Ziggs when he's never played it in a fucking playoff game. But they did for some reason. Like, I agree, that is the definition of trying to get cute. You're trying to go like above and beyond what you need to do almost there. You can just pick, at the moment, I have even thought at the moment, the meta in the playoffs is very neutral. You can pick a lot of different ways. They just picked away from their own strengths though, dude.
I think it really hurts at the general narrative too, because EG got coaching staff of the split,
yes.
And so it's always often thrown as the memes like, oh, coaching staff of the split making these blunders. But then I'm always trying to think, well, what if it wasn't the coaching decision that didn't want to play with Tristana, right? Like, imagine a world where Danny has that pop off play and is saying, you know what? Don't give me Tristana again. I'm not feeling it. If the player is asking for it, where should the coach step in? I still think that the coach should have the final say and say, listen, you're just picking this no matter what. But that's the only way that I'm thinking it's not as bad for what had actually happened, because they at least recognized it in the second game against Cloud9 that they needed to pick this champion, and they almost won with it. It was their best look. They still lost because they were just not good. But then Cloud9 banned it in the first 3. Cloud9 respected their Tristana more than EG respected their own players' Tristana.
Yeah, on that point that you're saying there, I get what you mean, because obviously on one level, if you're the coach, you've got to let the player have some input. Like, obviously he needs to tell you things like how comfortable he is, if he thinks he can actually play this matchup, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem. I agree with the way you concluded it there. Even though if I'm the coach, in most scenarios would give the player, like, I'd listen to the player's opinion, you know, I'd certainly take it on board. The difference is, at the end, if I'm the coach, like, I'm the one who does get fired if we lose. Like, I will make the final decision though, you know. So whereas I'm not saying I would say like, you're playing this that you don't want to play. At the same time, like, if you come to me with a wacky idea like that, I might just say, look, I appreciate the input, but I'm going to say no, because at the end of the day, like I say, I'm the one who gets fired if we lose these fucking games, mate. You just look bad. There's a difference, you know, with the outcome on that one. Because I do think that's one thing I hate when coaches in interviews, they try to make it like, well, I didn't really have any choice over it. It's like, well, if that's the case, mate, we're not really coaches at this point, are we? We're sort of like, the joke is we are what Reginald claimed Monty was all those years ago, which fake coaches for the cameras at that point.
They're just the straw men, right? The coaches are the people to blame for the loss. Do you win? The player's amazing. You lose?
Yes.
Coach if.
Yes, basically. Because as you say as well, if the coaching split of the fucking, like, the ones who win the award can't do that, then who the fuck is the coach at that point in time?
So that's actually another interesting thing, because I do think that there is a possibility that we're just not going to have coaches in LCS anymore. Like, people hate this job. There's not a lot of people that actually want to do the job of head coach.
It's a lot of pressure for
the LCS. And in the NBA, apparently, and I don't follow it, I just heard from someone telling me that in a comparison to league, the coaching job is one of the most replaced jobs of all time. Like, coaches barely last. They're always just, it's very common that they play on one team and then just go to another team the next year and then just keep cycling back and forth. And no one's really developing coaches in NA. No one really, there's not a surplus of people that want to take up this responsibility. So I think it's going to get to the point where we're going to probably go back to the old times where people were just glorified managers, and that actually might work better than a lot of the coaching strategies that we have right now. And it's not to say that EG is in this position, because they definitely got a lot better with the coaching situation that they hired over the start of the year. But a lot of teams don't have that. A lot of teams just get worse from the coaching staff. And I think that once they start getting replaced more and more, well, a lot of these player-run teams will become very obviously player-run.
The other issue was this as well. Even though at the end of the regular split, when they already had the big streak of wins and EG was already near the top of the table, they already had started to weave contracts into the odd game and start to use him. In the playoffs, they completely swapped, if people don't know, and essentially contracts just became the starting jungler, and Svenskeren got the odd, I think he played 2 games or something in the entire playoffs. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, again, if we're talking about doing one thing in the regular split and then one thing in the playoff, in the regular split, Svenskeren, regardless of what form you think he's in, he was winning a lot of games on what are literally still the meta champions, on the Viego, on the fucking Lee Sin or Diana. If he plays these, Diana especially, like if he plays Diana, Viego, right now, by the way, main picks for jungle, he was doing very well. So they chose instead to go with, I won't say rookie because he's played many years, but Contracts is a much less experienced player. I mean, he's barely played in the playoffs in his career. He's often been on kind of like not very good teams, mid-table LCS teams, basically. What did you think of this switch? Because I could see on some games where they were going for it. Certainly, like, let's be real, like, Contracts is a way more proactive player, and obviously, you know, to some degree, you could say that fits with Jizuke, but I have to say, I'm a bit of a Contracts hater. I think he's just not actually that good. Like, I think he's okay. I don't mind him being an LCS, but put it this way, if I was an EG fan, I wouldn't want him as my jungler in that sense. Like, I feel like he makes too many mistakes. I mean, he hints too much, dude. What do you think? You used to be a jungler, so I'd be interested in your thoughts on the two players.
At the start of the split, this, I guess it's now, it looks obvious now. There were rumors that Contracts and Svenskeren were already splitting time in scrims before the split even began.
Right.
So EG was already doing this before they even started playing the game. Okay. So it was not something that was just coming out of the woodwork. They started doing this, and it was just once it got to a certain match that they wanted to try him, and he looked good. He had Diana better than Svenskeren. So Svenskeren has the Diana now. He has the Viego over Contracts, at least in the 100 Thieves series. He did look much better on it than the Contracts did since he couldn't play it. But when it came to replacing the jungler, it's not a role that is mechanic or champion based, in my opinion. Like, they say that, oh, you have a different champion pool, and sure, you can play these different picks, and that's going to affect the draft, but not nearly as much as affecting the draft for a solo lane or an AD carry or any other role. So I do think the jungle role is most important for communication, for actually synergy with your teammates. So I don't like replacing the jungle unless you already have somebody who has more experience. Like, it's almost like the situation with, what was he, Blank and Bengi, where you went away from the person with less synergy to put the guy that has more experience with your lanes. I like that change. So if Svenskeren had been a long-time player with EG and Contracts is the starter, I would say bring Svenskeren in. I need to see somebody with higher synergy with the solo lanes. When it's the opposite, I think that's when they really struggle. So I don't like the jungle change in almost any situation where you're replacing and hurting the synergy with lanes and hurting communication that is already such an important part of the game. So it wasn't my favorite. I think it was justified because the play and the champion pool were nearly identical, so nobody could really tell them apart. But I think that I would have liked to see EG just stick with a similar roster, because despite the good things that this team has done this year, even last year, this is one thing that they never really did. They never stuck with a roster for the whole time. They always switched somebody else. Jizuke was switched out. Yep. Danny was switched out half the split. That was an upgrade for sure. But now with Contracts and Svenskeren, where does that leave Impact and Jizuke? They have to fend off for themselves, and I think it really showed.
Yeah, because that's the other thing that I have a problem with here is actually the example you gave was the one I'm thinking of, which is the Blank and Bengi one, where obviously what they would do is they would use Blank because that was clearly who they thought was the better jungler at the time. But then every time he got in trouble in the playoffs, they would just bring Bengi in because he was so experienced, and they were like, right, save the game, basically. Like, you know, obviously the game's gone to shit and this guy's like choking a little bit. The problem in this scenario is, like, I know they sort of did that in the 100 Thieves series, but actually in the last series they played against Cloud9, EG did the opposite. They started Svenskeren, even though apparently he's not the player they want as the main jungler, then just just benched him and then had contracts play the other games. Normally you do it the other way around, you know, like you'd put contracts in if you think he's the best player. And then the idea is if the series is going to shit you down 0-2, you go, right, come on, experienced player. Because you do notice as well, this is something else I want to ask you about as a jungler. I notice as well, Svenskeren, like a lot of other junglers, even though his whole career, people often actually praised his mechanics, much like the other mechanical junglers, he's also done that thing where the longer your career goes on, you tend to just make, even if not champion pool pick style, your style of play, your playing style tends to become more control. You tend to be less of the raw ganker, you know. The Jankos has done the same thing in Europe. Basically, Smithy. I mean, it's funny because a fan now...
They become conservative.
Yeah. Dude, a fan now is going to think, Smithy, he was... No, dude, you won't know. He used to be a fucking Lee Sin, man. I'm not joking. Like, the Smithy you're all thinking of the last few years, yes, he was the extreme version of that. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what's your take on why that happens to junglers? Because if you notice, you tend to go that route, don't you? You start as like the hot, basically Lee Sin play. You start as the hot playmaker who's going crazy, blabber, and you end up, though, if you keep playing along, if you always end up as the kind of control brain player, right?
I think part of it is that you learn what your teammates want from you as a jungler, and your team always feels better when you're playing control role and when they don't have to play around you and expect you to carry every time. Because it's really difficult to hard carry from the jungle and be, say, the Kindred player that is always winning, the Graves player. This is really taxing on your teammates because they have to now switch their champion pools around you. You're no longer the engage. They have to make you the star. And it's not as consistent. It looks really good because you just style on other junglers and you can stomp from the jungle into a lane, almost into a jungle into jungle a little bit harder than the laners can. The jungle diff is one of the most obvious ones when it goes well. So I think that junglers over time realize how damaging it is for their team synergy if they're always asking for, give me the counter pick. Give me the strongest pick and play around me and just all around me. And it just doesn't synergize with what their jungle role is best at doing, which is just putting out fires in lanes and making sure that their teammates shine. So I think that as players grow and they see their role through kind of a bird's eye view, more removed than just me playmaking and trying to be the star, they realize, okay, it's better for me and better for my team's sanity if I actually just try to help them out. If I just blind pick my champion right now, pick it early, you guys can save your picks. And I think that morale is more valuable than you being that hyper carry jungler. And I think that's what happens with age, because these players age and then play that way. It's not like they start that way.
100 Thieves played TSM and it was the same thing, Crumbz. It doesn't matter that I would assume some of the 100 Thieves people are intelligent and they can look at the flaws of the team. You have to also have the players to be able to actually win the series, though. In the game, you got to have the skills. So give me your thoughts. Like, is there a world where you think you think Immortals actually has, like, do they have the pieces to do it? Can you see it happening?
Yeah, I think so. You know, they're going to ask me for my predictions today to see which team is going to win. I'm going to submit Immortals. I am going to submit Immortals because I think that this
as a flyer, they're not the favorite, surely. You mean as like a crazy pick, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the standings of my predictions this whole time, but from what I've been hearing in Immortals, they have been having some really strong scrims. And one thing that they have against TSM is that they are not predictable with their draft, right? They actually have a variety of champions that they can play that encompass different styles, while TSM is so boring. Yes. Holy shit, TSM is boring. PoE is just playing control. There's no variety. There really is nothing different going on. Sword Art was running it down that last game. If you just anticipate Sword Art is going to roam, look out to catch Sword Art. PoE will not roam. He will stay and play control mages. Lost, maybe you can dive him, and then they'll try to play towards Huni, keep wards against Spica, and ban some of Huni's stronger comforts. What does TSM do? They don't go outside of these boundaries that they've set up for themselves. I don't know why, but they tried to expand them throughout the whole year. It just did not work. So they fall back to this style because it's what they think is their strongest. And that means it's pretty predictable. So I'm thinking, Revenge, what do? All right, play a strong champion topside that can be weak side and can be relevant in team fights. Gnar, Tahm Kench, Maybe Renekton, right? That's already 3 picks that you can play weak side. You can survive ganks. You can be really relevant later into the game. What about Insanity? All right, something that can push and could keep up with a control mage and roam at the same time. So maybe Rise into the mid lane because PoE is not playing Rise. Maybe you can even go with a Twisted Fate if you'd like. Just something that can actually move across the map while mid lane stays in there. Then you could probably go with a Varus into the bottom lane if you don't get banned because you can rush the Umbral Glaive and start getting better vision, denying division for TSM, and actually keeping tabs on Sword Art by having some sort of roaming support that can also fight, like a Braum, like a Nautilus, just something really strong, and maybe Trundle in the jungle because they're going to play a tank, and it's really difficult for immobile mages to play this, or shit, just a Viego if you want to pop off. So I think that there's a lot of ways through the draft that IMT can play that they can actually beat TSM. The problem is, the one problem they've had all year long, these players end. These players run it down sometimes when they actually have to execute cleanly and not make a mechanical misplay to win the game, they almost always falter. And that's where your point stands, where the players may just not be good enough. They actually have the champion pool. They know what they need to do, but they're getting caught too many times, and individually they're not performing when they absolutely have to, when they're on critical roles. I'm thinking of Insanity so many times. At the start, when he first joined, it was against Team Liquid, where I think there was a missed shockwave and all these other moments that were so close to taking a win. And then we thought, oh, surely these little misplays will be shored up, but they're still there. And that's the problem I have from IMT, that these are the misplays that they've had all year long, no sign of slowing down. But, if they have a good game, those can disappear in a single best of series. So maybe if IMT does that, then they can win.
Yeah, I have to say on the TSM drafting side, this is something I want to discuss a little bit because I actually have found their drafts to be fairly lackluster. Like, in some of the drafts TSM has done in the playoffs legitimately look, dude, like the players just get to pick whatever they want as the champion in that moment. Because some of them look like the players occasionally. Like Huni, for example. Huni and Sword Art look like they just pick... Huni, Sword Art and PoE look like they just pick comfort picks all the day long. They just say, like Sword Art, it doesn't matter what the game is, he just says, give me Leona every single time. As you say, PoE is going to take the boring fucking control mage. Huni is going to literally, it's almost like he has his on like a die that's randomized though. He's going to take like a fucking, like a Lee Sin, a fucking Jason, but he's just going to take it randomly. Even sometimes first picks it when it doesn't make sense, or gets it as a counter pick and does nothing. So one of the questions I had is, I noticed when people talk about TSM's draft, I never hear the word Bjergsen said, even though he is the coach of the team. Now the reason I bring it up is this. Look, obviously you have to speculate what the coach does, like we did with, for example, earlier with Evil Geniuses. But I will say this, Crumbz, actually, I always thought a flaw of the TSM teams that Bjergsen played in, because if people don't know, famously they either literally didn't have coaches, like you should just fire them during the split, or essentially they would sort of cock the coaches a bit, which is like people technically be listed as the coach, but I heard behind the scenes, like Bjergsen and Doblev could basically just go to Reginald to be like, I don't like what this guy's doing, like tell him to let me do what I want, basically, and they could sort of like go around the coaching stuff. So I always got the vibe, quite frankly, in TSM the squad, that actually the players already sort of just picked whatever they wanted anyway in the draft as it was, and the coach just picks it for them on stage. Like, I don't think personally it was Path that was like setting all those bad drafts. So I get the feeling like, if he was at Worlds and Bjergsen and Doblev want to play, so they just play where they want, mate. So I wonder if Bjergsen actually has carried this on, because it doesn't seem as though he's doing sort of the Reaper approach where you're more top down and you're like, right, I want you to play this because it's going to do this in my comp or something, I've found generally, like I say, considering there's so many options in the meta for coherent drafts, like the obvious example would be that last game against Team Liquid, dude. Like, I don't know what their draft is there, mate. Like, that is just like, that's almost like Bjergsen's trolling his team. Like, I don't know why, like, Spiker's on fucking Jarvan. Dude, Jarvan isn't even a champion right now. Like, the whole draft's like, what?
Jarvan Lee Sin, right? Jarvan Lee Sin.
And then they obviously baited Sword Art into the fucking Bard because of how godlike CoreJJ. Dude, everything about that draft's a nightmare. That's like complete mind games and just win for Team Liquid as far as I can tell.
So I do hear rumors that, and these aren't even rumors, these are practically facts. And I think you could really tell that the orgs are definitely way more player run than before. And it's not so much that the coaches are actually empowering or giving away power to the players. It's more like the ownership of teams cucks the coaches and thus empowers the players.
Right.
And so by the virtue of that happening, then the players can do whatever they want, because they don't need to listen to the coach if they've got the CEO that is giving them full confidence to do whatever they want.
Sure.
And so the coach is like, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't get in the way of this guy or else it's my job. So I think that the players definitely have a lot more say now, and it just doesn't become that apparent until we get these boosted drafts that just don't make any sense. I mean, yeah, the Jarvan got buffed, and so maybe he's thinking that's why, but it's just a terrible draft. It was never going to make any sense for TSM, and LeBlanc is the one thing that PoE can play that is different from a control mage, but every time he plays it, it shows up against weaker mid laners, and that's just not there anymore. Maybe against Insanity that can work, but the fact that they took away the Bard, they probably barely played Bard. Probably just, it's like you said, they saw CoreJJ just trash them and thought, oh, we gotta take this away from him. I can do it better, and just looks like ass. So TSM, it continues to experiment, but just in the wrong ways, man. They needed to stick with it all year long. But I have a question for you, which is, do you think that, let's say they don't make playoffs here. Let's say they lose to IMT.
They don't make Worlds, you mean?
Yeah, right. They don't make Worlds. What do you do with this roster? Do you blow it up? I have
to say, I can't lie. I would just blow this whole thing up. Like, listen, I would do it where, pick. Here's what I would say: pick 2 players, and I would also say, I'd make Spica one of them. Like, I'd say take Spica and pick another player. So, say you like Power of Evil, you can certainly have good teams built around Power of Evil. You can even have good teams built around Huni, but I think you have to pick one of them because, in my opinion, the 2 together, it's not good enough, mate. I do think Spica, by the way, actually has shown through the whole time since they brought him in last summer, he actually is a quality piece who can even be on a team of the level of TSM. He actually does look pretty good. You've got to empower him, though. And so, in my opinion, listen, I'm talking from a very biased European perspective here, but in Europe, our game has always been around jungle mid synergy. So what I need a mid laner that suits Spica, and unfortunately, I don't think it was PoE. That wasn't the right pick. That wasn't the right pairing for me, I think they need more of a playmaking mid, basically. So I'm not sure who that should be. Maybe you get a European import. There's plenty of good players over there, but I would blow this up because the problem I have with TSM at the moment is I actually think none of the players are bad, right? Like, as much as I flame Sorda, I flame him because he's nowhere near what the name should be and the signing cost was, As an actual player, he's okay. They're all okay. My big problem is I think the base level of TSM's pretty good, but I don't think, the ceiling is very high, if you know what I mean. Like for example, I don't think it's even unreasonable to say Spica's the best player on the team, which in itself is
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, dude, if our jungler's the best and the laners are just good or above average, we're going to have a hard time ever doing anything even if we get the Worlds, aren't we? You've got to have some fucking laners to do something. So that's the problem. It's like this team reminds me, it's happened a few times now in LCS, where people make squads where it's just too much of one type of player. You don't have enough variety in style or aggressiveness or whatever. What would you do? Would you actually stick with some of the core? Would you keep the whole team?
I'd keep Spica. I'd only keep Spica. I think that's the one player that I haven't seen enough variety out of any other player to justify their synergies or justify themselves in here. I've been trying, the meta just does not seem to be going back to the favor of control mages all year long. It's really useful to have them, but to only have them is just not it. I think PoE absolutely needs to have other champions in his wheelhouse, or else it's just not going to work. It's too obvious. Right, Spica is gated by having to play AD carries, AD junglers all the time. So by PoE only playing control mages, you're actually weakening your strongest player. I don't like seeing that at all. I think that is the one aspect that is really bugging me about TSM, that PoE just needs to be able to play ADs or just need to be able to have another way to empower Spica, because together they're not working that well. And that's why they keep playing the top side, because they have better synergy through top and it works that way. But if you're playing top side of the map instead of playing through mid, you're now foregoing Dragon, you're foregoing your 2v2, which is why Sword Art leaves lane half the time to try to help out Huni. So they just push all the resources up there and open themselves up to lose every other part of the map because PoE is farming in mid. So I think that TSM is just so obvious. It's so obvious, and Team Liquid just dismantled them, right? They prepped really well against it and crushed them. The way they shat on Huni's Wukong was so beautiful. Oh my God. I mean, that is actually a fine matchup into Jace because you just look to all in every time, but they know that. So what do? They just play around it better than TSM. And if Team Liquid can play TSM's playstyle better than TSM, whose best chances of winning are through playing top, that already shows you this is not. It's just not the best team. At the very least, it's at the very best, they're second. They're second because their one style is playing through top, and another team does it so much better than they. So if they're already at second place, I don't see how this team can. I really don't think TSM is going to make the rules. I think IMT is going to do it, man. I really think. And if not them, Cloud9.
C9's definitely going to dust them off. I'm with you on that one.
There's just no way TSM does it.
Yeah, I even feel like it's TSM, unfortunately, it's too late in the bracket, even if they meet Cloud9 next, because Cloud9's sort of like figured some of their shit out and actually starting to power up slightly again. So I even think they should have caught them earlier if they wanted to beat him. Like, maybe they could have beaten him if they played him in the upper bracket, for example. Right, here's the problem I have as well. I want to get your take on this. Right, obviously, I do feel for the PoE angle because it might be the only year in the history of League of Legends where having someone who's amazing on control mages isn't quite good enough at mid lane. Like, every other year, that's normally the fucking meta in mid lane. It's like Orianna is here, and then, yeah, if you can play the odd side champion, you're the ones scrambling Jizuki style to get a weird draft. Whereas now, like you say, it's actually like the control mages actually make you a bit predictable and boring in terms of the style. Like, instead, if I know you're picking TF or something, now, fucking hell, I have to question what you're going to do in this game or where you're going to go. The other angle I had was this, right? People are going to say I'm just being a hater because obviously he's on TSM when I talk about Sword Art, right? But what they don't know, Crumbz, is I used to actually be very high on this guy a long time ago when he was on Flash Wars. He used to be an amazing player. By the way, another example of a player where they start out as like a mechanical monster. He used to be a beast on like Leona and Thresh and stuff. But now it just doesn't really sit. It's just not that player anymore. What I'd describe that as is this. If I just took the nameplate off and I was just watching the champion move around the screen, I wouldn't know this wasn't just an OK LCS player or a resident player or something, dude. Like, I don't see anything special, basically. Like, you know, obviously they hyped us also, the angle, and I was even told by some of the people who know Sword Art that he knew this coming in. Basically, when he joined, it was sort of implied, like, he's going to be the genius that shot calls the game and it's going to make us win the matches. Well, the problem is, you'd have to say that's one of the weakest areas of TSM, right? Like, mid-game macro, like, understanding what to do.
So, well, if that's what they're expecting, though, there's only been one player that's actually delivered on that when it came to support roles imports, which is CoreJJ. Yes. So, I mean, this man's contract is going to be so sought after. I wouldn't be surprised if teams dropping so much money on Sword Art and other players are just going to shell everything out for a core. Because clearly this is the one player that's like, damn, all right, we're getting value.
He's the most OP player in NA, isn't he, because of his role and what he can do.
You're getting value in regular season, outside of the game, in off season, in playoffs. People want to play with him in other teams. Everyone wants to work with this guy. I think that CoreJJ might even be, there's a world where other teams make bids for him, but Sword Art just has not worked out. And I think that burden is pretty tough to live up to when these players are expected to do so much. I think Perkz had the same thing. He might be, he still has opportunity to deliver on it.
Yeah, sure.
But he had really high expectations coming into the split, and I think that's always just really tough to end up delivering on, because half the time the expectations are set up before you even know who you're playing with. You don't know how those synergies are going to work out.
Which one player would you pick on Immortals needs to play really well if they want to win this series? Who would you pick as their win condition?
See, they've had a lot of good games from multiple players shining, but it'd be easy to say Revenge if he holds his own against Huni. If he beats Huni, that's going to be really important. But he does struggle sometimes to translate the lead into a win. So I think it'd have to be Destiny. I think when Destiny has had good games, that's been when they've been most oppressive. At the same time, it makes Raze look really good. His Thresh is the one thing that comes to mind. If he has a really good game of Thresh or he gets that pick, then it's going to just blow TSM wide open. Draven with the Thresh, whether it's Varus, whether it's the Ezreal. So I think just by Destiny having a good game, you let Raze have a good game as well. And then he can roam, and then he can match Sword Art and defend against Huni. And then he'll also have better vision if he's having, again, a strong game from the support role. So I think it's going to be a difference in supports. It's just going to be tough to see it because the way that a support wins a game for you, it's just not flashy, and it's really hard to see when it comes to a post game or even just as an observer. Like, how do you tell when he's got good vision score, who's dropping the wards, who's calling the games and telling you about the roams that are coming topside? So you won't be able to see it, but I think Destiny will be the difference maker.
Right, for me, I'll pick, and I'll say a player to highlight for this. I'll actually pick the jungler as Cersei, because if people don't know, it's funny because even though he was in like some pretty good EU teams, he doesn't have like a huge name. He's not like a guy who does loads of media, etc. So people don't really tend to actually talk about him that much. But from knowing a lot of his teammates over the years, they used to always rave about this guy, where even though he is, like his style is, he's sort of like a farm jungler, he doesn't gank tons. But what they told me was the reason why he gets away with that in the past is like the guy, no joke, is supposed to be amazing at knowing how to track the other jungler. Like they claim when you're playing a game with him, like you just see the fog of war and he can just tell you the whole time where the other jungler's like, oh, he's probably taking this camp here, or like he's going to path to you top now, and you're like, what the fuck are you taking that? But apparently he just has like a mega read for it. So what I'll say is, if Spicker's the best player on TSM, not bad to have a jungler who can do that, can just tell you basically where he is on the map at all times and potentially what he's going for. That'll help your laners out a fuck ton right there. So I'll say maybe that factor would be interesting if that could come into play. And also, let's be real, some of the champions at the moment in the jungle, you absolutely can just farm up still. That's still a thing.
I see that for sure. I forgot about Cersei being so important. If he could do that, and yeah, nullifying the top pick from TSM would also be really powerful. And I want to also add a little bit earlier from what we are talking about PoE, that how he's playing a lot of mages, because I think that the key isn't so much that he's playing only magic damage champions, is that he's not really playing the ones that are best at skirmishing early. There's no Silas, barely any Rise, right? Barely any Twisted Fate. It's the fact that they're all farm centric. Barely any, like the LeBlanc is okay. You just need to be more active in these picks. That was all.
Yeah, I'll also throw out there as well. Like, I actually think the Revenge picking him as the player to watch isn't bad either, because the other thing about Huni is this. The sad thing is, right, this is where I'm also going to be totally fair with the context. As mad as it sounds, we actually can't, in terms of teams, judging them for picking up players, judge a team like TSM as harshly for picking up Huni as past years. Because if people don't know, this year Huni is actually a resident player. So technically, if you only compare him against the NA players who are top laners, he would be the best, wouldn't he? He'd be up there. Like, obviously, people like Impact would be in the same category. You know, he'd be one of the better players. You know, in that scenario, remember, Alfari's an import. But the problem I have is this, right? Huni can't be like the best player on TSM. Like, if he is, they're not going to win, because my problem I have is this: even though he's got this really weird champion pool, he still will sometimes get ahead in lane, and he'll sometimes even get like a solo kill and stuff. But dude, you cannot rely on this player. Like, as soon as he starts moving around the map, he will just find a way to randomly die in the fog of war, or just, you know, walk into two enemy teammates, opponents rather, and just get killed for no reason. Like, yeah, as much as people complain about Perkz doing it, dude, I see Huni do it all the time, and everyone just seems fine with it for some reason. Like, you can't be doing these things when you're like the Jace player or something.
I think they get bored of seeing him do it. Like, it was novel for Perkz to do it. It's like, oh shit, he's actually he's dropping the ball. But like, how many times have we seen it from Huni already, right? He was in Academy as well. We've seen it happen there. So I think people are they've just accepted it, right?
They look at the best team in the LCS again. Do you agree? Do you have them as your best, or do you favour 100 Thieves? Where are you going on this one?
I mean, if there's ever a time to have any hope, I hope that some delusion. If you want to be delusional about World's chances, Team Liquid's the team for that. They really look so much better, and I think part of it is that, like you said, this roster is so stacked, right? Before the season started, before you even saw the results, you know the roster is stacked, and that usually means that you got veterans. You got players that have experience that you can count on when it comes to playoffs, when it comes to big series. And they got bored of the regular season that has no stakes. They have said this before. Alfari says it in interviews all the time. It's just straight up bored with the way the format is. It's very long. The stakes aren't really there. But now comes the best of. Now comes the times where the matches actually have Worlds implications at stake, and they turn it on. Right? This is where they're making their money. The org doesn't really give a shit if you don't do well in the regular season, as long as you win, as long as you show up, as long as you go to Worlds. That's what they really care about. So this is what the players also care about. So I think that turning it on now is not a surprise to me, but the way that they have overcome how much shit happened to them is really impressive. I had no faith in this team when they didn't have Thorin. I thought that they're really just not going to go far. But when Thorin came back, it's like, all right, now you actually have a way to unlock your laners, because that was the biggest problem. There was no synergy between working with Alphari, working with Jensen, and especially with CoreJJ. And, it's not Armeo's fault. I just think Thorin is a stronger player, but when he's on the team, they look so much better. I don't think the other teams really look close, and they're still playing to Alphari's style. They're still playing to his same champion pool, the same top 4 picks that are always relevant. The thing is, his pool is literally the most dominant.
I know. He's amazing on them all as well.
Right, like it's like if somebody went to a coach, one of these online coaches, and asked him, "Hey, I want a champion pool, and I just want to win lane. Like, what champions should I want to play?" It's just all of Alphari's champs. It's Gangplank, it's Gnar, it's Jace, then maybe it's a Camille, maybe it's a Renekton, and that's about it. But you're not banning him out because there's too many other broken shit in the game, and he's always going to get one of this, and the team is always going to play around it, and you're just going to get crushed in lane against it, and it works. No one's good enough to keep up with it. And so TL can just continue to play this way, and no laner is actually good enough to play against it. It's been pretty obvious. And when he has Thorin, when he's got CoreJJ helping him out, it's just no one can match him. Right? It's just too good in lane, and with the team to back him up, you can only fight this if you have players of the same caliber that have matchups that are just as good into it, that they have the same champion pool to fight these champs with, and then you have to have a jungler and a support to do it. And I just don't think there's anyone in NA that currently has this. Cloud9 won't be able to keep up with this.
Yeah, I'll also add as well, this is why during the split, whenever we would have discussions on shows about, like, Team Liquid, for example, I even said towards the end of the regular split, like, I'm not being as harsh as the other people are, where everyone was going like, wow, Jensen's washed, he's fallen off. I was like, mate, surely you get a pass when you, A, don't even have your real jungler, and B, your coach fucking quits halfway through the split. Like, you've got to give someone a pass for that. Like, the team's dynamic was obviously garbage because they didn't really have a real team, did they? Like, Alphari wasn't playing most of the games and then got brought back in awkwardly. The coach was fired/quit. And then, as I said, the jungler only basically came along at the very, very, very end. So Team Liquid never really got like a proper chance to see what their team was. Like, I'm not surprised they were so bad at times. But this team now looks monster. Like, what's great now as well is, Crumbz, you can even see where, like, strengths of players, like, then make the other players. Like, I'll give you an example. Imagine being Jensen. In the past, like in the Cloud9 days, you were the whole win condition. It was like, right, you must win lane, you must carry on your champion, it will be all on you in the team fight. When he plays now, most of the attention's going to top lane because everyone's trying to shut down Alphari. So when you are Jensen and you're just playing fucking Syndra, Oliver, you're just no jungle attention to you. You're just farming. If you wanted, you could roam. I mean, you are Jensen, so you're probably not going to roam very much. He's going to hit minions, but this is his dream, dude. Like, he's loving it. And by the way, I'm pretty sure, I know a lot of people expected this. I'm speculating, I never actually asked him, but I'm going to go ahead and speculate he personally asked for Thorin. If you know the kind of junglers that Jensen seems to like, that seems exactly in his wheelhouse. He wants the support of junglers just going to come when he says, you know.
I mean, Thorin he's kind of like Xmithy, but yeah, I guess it's very similar to Xmithy now in hindsight. Just a jungler that will be there, does his job, can carry if he needs to, has the relevant champion pool, is okay with giving up his lane. And I mean, Xmithy was the winningest jungler in the LCS, and I think Thorin's gearing up to do that right now. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this style is really, it works here, because the laners are the ones that usually are the ones who are getting imported. They have the highest skill ceiling, it seems. So just pair him with junglers that will back him up, and it usually works better. So it's not a surprise to me that Team Liquid has come up with this roster. The surprise is going to be how they do at Worlds, because I'm always victim to getting perhaps more hype than I should be. And that's not to say that I'm very particularly hopeful, but that there is more hope than I think history warrants, because these players are of world class, right? CoreJJ is a world class support.
Yes.
Alphari is a world class top laner. Like, that's already 2 out of 5 pieces. Thorin can work with them. I think Thorin would be world class. Probably not the best jungler in the world, but plays control, does his job, isn't really losing you games, right? He's doing his fine job. Tactical, holds his own, right? He can farm, he can land skill shots. Great. Jensen has proven to be pretty good at Worlds, so
I think they've got the pieces, dude. This really could be
right?
this should be a playoff team, right?
I think this could be a team that makes it out of groups. This could be a team that makes it out of groups.
Agreed. Because the thing is, I think unlike past years, like the only weak spot in the team looking like for me is tactical, and that was only when he was like playing things like Justana and he was basically stinting a little bit. I actually think with the current kind of like in NA, people aren't really playing through bot lane anyway. They're playing more like supportive, and as you say, CoreJJ just roams anyway, mate. He's on his own farming. So like as long as he just plays safe essentially and just doesn't die, it's fine. That's the rest of the players are good enough, and especially the best thing is like they've got the two advantages. That one, look at the solo laners, dude. This may as well be like a top European team if you look at the solo laners, and then as you point out, mate, CoreJJ is always going to be the OP one. CoreJJ might be the only player I've ever seen come to a Western region and not look like he ever stepped down a level. Like, I know he maybe has games that aren't good, but he always gets back to this peak level. Like, there's a reason the guy's won the fucking MVP a whole bunch of times. Like, deservedly so. He's ridiculous, isn't he?
If there is a player, like the highest paid player should be CoreJJ.
I agree.
I think no doubt. Like in and out of the game, it just doesn't matter. This guy is holding it down. Like he's shown commitment to the region, shown commitment to the team. Like, and just the in-houses in between scrims, right? Like single-handedly trying to improve. He got fed up with how trash his competition was, making videos about how to improve supports. Right, high-level videos about how he can make other supports better so that he can improve in return. That is the least complaining mindset possible. Instead of saying, "Oh, the competition's not good enough, I'm not improving," I'm gonna make the competition good enough so that I can improve. Instead of just saying that they're not. What more could you ask from this player?
Right, what about this then? One thing I want to ask you about in the draft, actually, is when 100 Thieves played against EG, actually, funnily enough, in that series, bizarrely, Abidagi just picked Ryze in all matchups except one, right? Meanwhile, on the other side of the draft from Jizuke, he actually was playing the champions that very likely Jensen will play. Like the LeBlanc, the Syndra, these are the champions that at the moment Jensen plays. I looked it up. Jensen actually only played one game of Ryze in the entire regular split. So what do you actually think in the mid lane matchup in this regard? Obviously two European mid lanes, but they might have like totally different champion pools in this matchup. We'll have to see. What would you anticipate?
I think Ryze is super high priority. I think before playoffs even started, I thought Ryze was going to be crazy good. If not just because EG was playing it and showing everybody how good he was, the rest of the team was really seeing how powerful he was. Got buffed, is a lost chapter champion. So there's a lot to go for when it came to Ryze. People started playing TF, but realized, hey, we can't team fight with this. Side lane's not that good. Who can we make global plays with? Ryze fit that wheelhouse as well. Easy to set up ganks, has some good matchups. So I did think that Ryze was going to be really, really important. And it didn't surprise me so much to see 100 Thieves pick it, but to pick it so many times and that EG did not contest it, that was what most surprised me. I think that 100 Thieves will still continue to play the Ryze because they won't mind taking it into a Syndra, into the LeBlanc. Because I think the strongest thing Ryze has going on for him is that his itemization works really well into the matchups that he's going to be facing off. You go into LeBlanc, you go into Syndra, you rush Merc Treads. Those champions can't really rush Merc Treads into you. They do need the Sorcerer's Shoes for damage. So you actually have an advantage in that you stay relevant, that you have kill threat on them, and they don't have kill threat on you anymore. And you're harder to gank, and you're moving faster across the map, so it helps your roaming style. So I think there's a lot that Ryze is going on for him that people are overlooking. And on top of that, he's easier to play. You get to a late game, he's bonkers, and you have a lot of playmaking with the ultimate, if not just for realm warping after a reset or realm warp to tower dive. So I think this champion is crazy good. Just right now, LEC's playing Ryze and really valuing him in the mid lane as well. So I think that TL will probably try to play this. I wouldn't want to leave it up because I think just let Abidagi play it. Even if I don't think it's that strong, which they might, he played 4 games of it in a row.
Yes.
Right? Just don't let them pick the same shit every time. It's something that apparently not every team remembered in a best of. Just take him off the things that they look good and ask them It's like, what else you got? All right, I saw you're good at Rise. Can you do something else? Okay, you can play something else. All right, we won't ban either. You're good, right? You're fine. Because 100 Thieves did that to EG. They said, all right, we think your Rise and your Syndra's not good. Show us what else you got. Oh, your Lucian is trash right now? Great. We found a weakness. We're going to win through it.
I agree, because the other thing is as well, if you think about when 100 Thieves were at their best, it was with fairly limited champion pools. And obviously the mid lane, they were playing very specific champions to make the comp work. So I would agree, if they find a comp that works, just tell Abadagi, I want to see your third and fourth best picks. Let's see what else you've got. Because a bunch of the picks he was using in the actual split aren't even relevant now. Like, by the way, good luck picking a Carly right now. Or forget picking fucking Karma. Like, these aren't picks right now. Like, that's why actually, in some ways as well, Jensen has almost sort of had the meta just back into him. Like, Syndra and LeBlanc already a champions he likes to play whenever possible, and they just happen to be flavor of the month at the moment.
I think something really interesting that is always applicable in League is that the difference between a player having an absolute career-defining game and the worst int of his life can just be champion. It just changed the champion, and he can go from the star to the trash can. And you just got to try to ban them out. I think this is one of the most fun aspects of the game anyways. It's just seeing, all right, who can we make int? Who can we actually put off comfort and just make them into a punching bag that we can win through? And Abadagi has shown that he's not that. He's shown that he actually has a wide enough champion pool that he can hold his own, right? Ban out the Ryze, he can play the Syndra, he can have the Orianna, which is proven to be pretty good at it. Maybe has something else as well. Probably. He's played plenty through the regular season, but Jizuka did not. And Jensen has enough as well. So I think mid lane pool is just a matter of what we want that is comfort and what we want to even just make sure that you don't get too comfortable on it. Because, man, 4 games in a row of something is just outrageous.
Yes.
He's so warmed up. He knows everything about this champion right now. If he didn't know it before, he's at least going to improve ever so slightly, game after game, whether it's in the last hitting and setting up the minion wave. It just refines the gameplay further, and it's just never where you want to be. You always want to try to get the team into the weakest position possible, not try to fight them at their best.
Right, one thing that will be very interesting is obviously the top lane matchup. As you alluded to, like basically, once they hit the playoffs, everything's been amazing for Alphari. He looks like exactly the player that everyone wanted to see this summer. And by the way, if he'd have played like this in the regular split, he would have been the MVP. He probably would have just been like, but here's the question I have. On the other side, the narrative's supposed to go, unfortunate for some days, isn't it? Because, you know, he was like far away the best player for most of the teams in the LCS in past years. But then this year, when he finally got the good team, he was actually looking pretty ropey himself. You know, he was having a lot of shaky games. I noticed when in the EG series, he seemed to play a lot better. I'll also throw in there, he also, by the way, plays a lot of the champions that currently are very strong in the top lane and always has for the last few years. The Jace, the Gangplank. He plays all the shit that you can imagine, right? Renekton. The question I have is this: how well do you actually think current Someday is going to do in this series?
He did really well into Impact. I think he had a similar champion pool. Let me take a look at exactly what he had, because I know he prioritized Gnar a lot, which is going to be fine. So it's going to be a contested pick. Also had the Gangplank. That'll play well into him. So I do think that they have a similar champion pool that will probably be really relevant in this matchup. Now, will Huhi and match CoreJJ effectively? Will Closer actually play as well as Thorin to the top side? I think that will be the biggest difference maker, because that's the one thing that's always about TL. It's not just Alphari, it's the trio that ends up roaming to his side and playing towards him better than any other team. And 100 Thieves has not been a top side focused team. If anything, they usually play more towards the bot side. They usually play more towards mid. So Someday will have to fend for himself. And either 100 Thieves will prep like they did against CG, recognize what they're up against and try to match it, or they'll double down on their own strategy with FBI, which I think probably won't be the case, even though there's a lot of AD carries that really can carry games right now. You can just leave them by themselves, because it's just so much more volatile in the top side of the map, right? You can put him on Varus, yes, put him on Jhin, put him on Aphelios, and everyone's roaming. So it doesn't really matter what action can happen to your AD carry when your top lane's getting denied and it's getting camped at level 1. So I think that someday we'll just need to really be good at calling for help from Huhi in particular. Because if Huhi isn't there to cover the dives, having the jungler won't be enough. Because there's going to be TPs from mid showing up as well. Everybody wants to dive topside because they know once you unlock Alfari, they've won almost every single game they've done that. So they know that that's just what TL has to fight towards. If they get it, they're playing relaxed. They know they're cruising to the win, whereas 100 Thieves just needs to stop that.
One thing I want to ask you was this, actually. For 100 Thieves, by the way, massive props to them already making it to Worlds. Like, I would have picked against them a bunch of times. I would have thought a bunch of these squads would already be qualified. I thought they would be competing for the last spot, so already qualified, I already have to give them the win. They've done it right. But one thing I do have an issue with is, I do feel as though, like, I understand why some people would say Abadage is their best player because he's the more recent one to join in the middle. Like, listen, if you play a Carly and you kill everyone, it's going to look flashy. I think you could make an argument. It's debatable. I think FBI might be the best player on this team. I think he played a very good split. And in general, he's another player I've seen year on year look like he just gets better and better. Like I actually think he now deserves to be on like an elite level team compared to, years ago when he was on Golden Guardians or whatever and was getting the odd game. So my question is this, though. It does feel like in LCS, at least, people don't try to basically make the AD carry like the main win condition. As you're saying, they tend to play away from it or just put you on like sometimes even supportive champions there. They don't always give you like a hard carry shot. What do you think about how, like, do you think they enable FBI in this series?
I think you just enable him by the champion picks. I think you just give him either Varus, which is really strong right now, so it probably won't be available that many games, but when it's up, you just have to first pick it. Aphelios is something that they'll really like as well. So I think you just enable him with the champion pick and you don't put him on something like an Ashe. Ashe is going to be good, but you just need to give him something that is high DPS that can single-handedly win a fight. And I think that's how you enable him. You don't need to play towards him because if you just draw attention to the other side of the map, then he's inevitably going to win his lane. So I think that's what you can count on for FBI. And I also want to touch on your point about 100 Thieves doing really well this year, because I was just reflecting on the org, even beyond the LCS. Simply, even beyond the LCS, they're crushing it. But within the LCS, I mean, they're carrying the new half of the latest iteration of teams into the LCS, right? If you look at the bottom 5 teams, you could put them all together and they still don't come close to the efforts that 100 Thieves have done, which they have 4 years, 2 Worlds appearances. Fucking already amazing. Yeah. Right? Amazing already. Academy titles, right? And multiple top finishes in Academy. They've got a team of players that is amateur below Academy that already has players moving into other Academy teams, into LCS teams that other orgs are interested in. So developing talent. Amazing already. Content that is already better than all the other teams, influencers within league that are already better at other teams, actually a product that funnels from the LCS into their own merch and whatever that they're trying to sell, sponsors that are superior to the sponsors that a lot of the teams are getting. So, I mean, within the time span that 100 Thieves has joined, they really are carrying a large part of the LCS teams. And makes me wonder what could happen if other teams actually had a vision and continue to work towards it as opposed to just flopping around aimlessly like some are doing.
No, agreed. Like in general, I'd agree. It's like whole spectrum what they've done. In fact, by the way, if people don't get this angle, I'll make it quite clear. In my opinion, that's the way it goes. It's actually that you set up everything else. It's the results that will usually come at the end, because obviously they are actually like the consequence of getting the right structure, getting marketing, getting the right player, getting the right, in this case, getting the right general manager. There's another one. When they hired Papa Smithy, a lot of people, it's like every other talent to like job move. You never know. You can't just take the fact you think the guy's a brilliant commentator and know they'll do good in a different job. Same way as I can't take the fact that I thought Jack was the best analyst doesn't mean he was the best coach for this specific team. But I have to say, you look at the job Papa Smithy's done, piece by piece, he's gotten there. Like, you look at the squad he started with at the beginning of 2020, the team's like twice as good now. And that is just good general managing. Like, you make the right move here, you make the right move there. Obviously, this even move he did in the offseason where he got the Golden Guardians one, it looked like Yeah, it's a good idea, but it doesn't work because you don't have the good mid laner. And then all of a sudden he gets a top European mid laner. So it's all come together really beautifully right now. I agree. I hope other orgs are watching. They're sort of like taking notes on how you do it. Because if you think of some of the teams, the obvious ones are like the CLGs of the world, some of them are in really bad shape right now. Golden Guardians, like these squads, they don't have anything going for them, do they? They don't have the market. They don't have the players. They don't have anything really at the moment.
No one wants to join, and that's what's going to make it really hard for them to crawl out of their hole, because everyone wants to go to the top orgs that are actually showing that they're doing something interesting. And I do think it actually took a lot for 100 Thieves to recognize, hey, that first roster we tried at the start of the year, that was shit. We need to pivot. We need to recognize that we made a mistake and there's a better opportunity here. Bam, switch. It's like, okay, not good enough. All right, we can still do a little bit better. Find another solution. Coaching. All right, find another solution. So I think that has taken a lot of accurate self-reflection from 100 Thieves to know that some of their initial moves weren't ideal for the goals that they had, and actually fix them as quickly as possible and met the result that they needed on time. Because, I mean, I think right now as an org, they could just absolutely explode right now. I had a tweet about this that I'm just going to hit again. They have a collaboration with Gucci, and they're going to China, the largest luxury goods market in the world, in the largest esports event in the world. And they have already aimed to be some sort of hype beast luxury goods brand. So if they can hit this well, like the only thing the 100 Thieves team needs to do at Worlds is not be embarrassing. That's it. Like the bar is just be good, right? Be okay. Don't even just go 3-3 in groups and you're solid. Make it out of groups. Holy shit. Just make a mark in China that is something that teams can be proud of. The fans are proud of, that Chinese teams and fans are interested in, and this org easily now becomes the top org in the LCS, and it really wouldn't be close. I think the only thing that has happened that is remotely close, though, is the FTX deal that TSM did, because that was, I mean, that's just an insane amount of money and really relevant to the scene, but no one else has done anything as major, and I think 100 Thieves is poised to actually overtake TSM in that regard.
Right, obviously the weird thing about the way the playoffs is set up at the moment is like the games never stop because we're in the low bracket portion as well. So I'll just ask you as the final question, being as like, even though you're going to pick Immortals, I'm going to say TSM plays against Cloud9 at this point in time, because I'm going to be the adult in the room on this one. So my question is this, right? The main focus of that entire series, no matter what it really is analytically, just because this is the way that the TSM fans have sort of played their cards this split, is they're going to make it all about the fact that they think Perkz sucks. Because if you notice, it's at the moment how they deflect the sword art play and they're just going about Perkz. They also, to them, it's hilarious that, Cloud9 spent all these millions and blah, blah, blah. Even though I always point out, you didn't technically spend the millions for what you're going to do now. You spend it for what you did in the past. That's what made his value so high. That's actually the way buying things works, in case people don't understand. That would be like me buying a Mercedes now and then you going, well, how could it be worth half as much when you take it off the lot, Thorin? It's because you only buy it for that, then the value becomes less, it's second hand, isn't it? So my question is this. Obviously, fans on Reddit are going quite extreme. Like, a lot of them actually basically make Perkz sound, quite frankly, washed. They just make it sound like he's just not a good player anymore, right? He clearly hasn't been a very good player. I mean, nobody had him anywhere close to MVP votes and stuff, of course. Even in Cloud9, I don't think he was probably the best player. Where you actually have Perkz at, because if he plays against TSM, this is going to potentially be a factor if Cloud9 is going to win, is how well will he play. So where is Perkz at for you? And what flaws, if any, have you seen? And what do you think his issues are?
Ramping up. I have Perkz right now ramping up. It's still not there. It's not at the fully fledged playoff Perkz that we've seen before, but it's better than regular season. It's the same attitude that the TL members had, that they're improving as the stakes go up. So I think that Perkz is in that position, and I think from the buyout that he had and the situation that got him here, there's no way he's not trying. You gotta absolutely give it your all, because this is a big deal for these players. I don't think Perkz came here to retire at all. I think he really came here to try to win in the same way that CoreJJ showed up. He's having a rough time, but he's still here at playoffs. The team is looking better, and I think he has the right champion pool for winning at playoffs. I think he has a pool that really can snowball, that has picks that can just take over the game. That's what I want to see out of playoff teams, just picks that can punish mistakes relentlessly from the enemy, that can constantly force them to make decisions. LeBlancs, Rise, these picks that are so mobile are just so powerful right now. So I think Perkz' champion pool, spot on. You can always fall back on other picks like Silas that he won last spring with. So I really like his champion pool. I think it's looking a bit better with Blabber. They're working in tandem more coordinatedly than in spring, but I still think he can get better. So I do think that they're actually going to come in really strong in the next best set that they play to go to Worlds, which is scary because part of me wants to say, fuck all these teams, just send IMT to Worlds. I know they're not probably going to do anything, but just let's just see what these guys can do, since I have little faith in other teams. But if Cloud9 legitimately improves more than they currently have with this series, then gets another series to improve, and then maybe plays in the losers bracket finals, wins that and looks even better, and then maybe wins the whole thing with another best of 5, then I'm going to be completely bought into Cloud9, because they've climbed their way out of the gauntlet, and they've shown that they can improve a lot, and they have been historically the best org at Worlds. But no, part of me just says burn it, just send IMT.
Yes. I will say this, like, there's two things. One that I've said on a lot of the shows, but I just think it's true if you just watch it with the eye test. One thing I love about the way Perkz has been playing, even when he's been inting and having bad games, is he's never useless. Like, he always finds a way in the game to still make a play, to do something.
He's always killing wards. Always killing wards.
There's that as well, to some degree. Listen, that's still something. We all have to clear vision. No, obviously, like, listen, if you want someone to potentially get someone else's lane ahead when his isn't, he's a guy who knows exactly what he's doing in that sense. And I'll even throw this in as well. Even though individually, certainly this has been far from one of his best years, he basically has that swag that the quarterback Aaron Rodgers has, right? Which is last year when Aaron Rodgers was like the MVP of the NFL. People said to him, like, oh, well, the year before you had a down year, and he had this line, right, which is gangsters fuck. So I'll apply it to Perkz here, right, which is imagine a world where Perkz comes to LCS, wins the first split, then goes to MSI, doesn't make playoffs, but does, wins against the Chinese team, wins against the Korean team. Then in summer, let's say he just makes Worlds. He don't make it to the final, they just make Worlds. Like, he could say the same thing Aaron Rodgers did in his pithy line. He said, funny, because a down year for me is like a career year for most other people. When he can say that, you're just a fucking gangster. Because let's be real, if you're anyone else who plays in the LCS, to win a split, win some games off international teams and go to Worlds, dude, that's what you take that in an instant. You'd snap the guy's hand off at the beginning of the year. But this is, by the way, what fans don't realise is this: you're actually showing that on some level you do revere Perkz, because you're holding him to a godlike standard, He's got to just win everything.
If you had Insanity win spring, go to MSI, flop, and then still make Worlds, that's the best. It's gonna be hard for him to top that year. That is, he's getting 5x signed on his contract next year, right? That is an absolute big year. So that really shows how highly revered Perkz is then, because that's a good one. I think he might even say that. If you talk to him, tell him about it.
Kindly supported by Kris with a K, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Shenlong, Travis Goff, Wisetown, Zachary Carter, Zack Schmidt, ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Kris, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and Joshua Gardiner. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask one of those questions for my video AMA. Do you want teasers? Find out who the guests are for my upcoming shows. Maybe you even want to be a nerd having a long 2 or 3 hour discussion with me about anything on one of those video discussions. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.